My best friend turned my partner against me by spreading vicious lies. When I exposed her, she said, "He deserves better." But my revenge left her alone and despised by everyone. It was supposed to be a normal Monday. You know, one of those days you just need to get through, especially when you're pushing 46 and trying to survive in an industry where anyone over 35 is treated like yesterday's leftovers. The day also happened to be my birthday, and I was just hoping to coast through it without too much fuss. A few people at the office would say happy birthday in passing, maybe I'd treat myself to a nice lunch or something, small wins, you know? But as I stood there, adjusting the awkward little happy birthday balloon that Shelley, the receptionist, had taped to my computer, my boss, Jack Medford, waltzed over. I knew something was off when he didn't even offer his usual forced grin. Jack wasn't one to sugarcoat things, but he wasn't usually blunt either. More passive-aggressive, really. "Maddie," he said, leaning against the edge of my cubicle, that thin-lipped smile nowhere in sight. His voice was a bit too calm, like he'd rehearsed what he was going to say. "Can I see you in my office?" There it was, a cold wave of dread rushing over me. You can tell when it's coming, like an animal sensing an approaching storm. But I kept my face neutral, nodded, and followed him down the corridor. Jack's office was as sleek and soulless as ever, polished mahogany desk, giant framed photos of skyscrapers and cityscapes on the walls. Jack, with his perfectly combed hair and manicured nails, was the kind of guy who made you feel small, like he was always looking down at you, even when you were standing. As I took a seat, he lowered himself into his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and looked me straight in the eye. No birthday wishes, no preamble. "Maddie," he started, voice steady but with a trace of that patronizing tone he'd mastered, "we need to talk about your role here at Dominion Properties." I shifted slightly, not sure if I should be bracing for impact or trying to stay calm. "All right. What's going on?" He cleared his throat, crossing one leg over the other like this was some sort of performance. "Look, I'm just going to be upfront with you," he said, raising his eyebrows as if he was the one being put out here. "We're restructuring." "Restructuring," I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. "What does that mean for me?" He pursed his lips, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face as if my question had interrupted his rhythm. "It means that your position, as it stands, is no longer a good fit." I blinked, my stomach dropping as I tried to process what he was saying. Good fit?" I managed, incredulously. "Jack, I've been here for 6 years. I've handled the worst deals, covered up for your messes. Now, Maddie, there's no need to get defensive." He held up a hand, all the while keeping that infuriating calm. "We just need someone. Well, someone with a bit more energy, someone who's fresher, perhaps." I let out a bitter laugh, my voice shaking a bit despite myself. "Fresher? You mean younger, right?" Jack gave me a pitiful smile, his eyes flicking down to his Rolex. "You can take it however you want to take it, Maddie." I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of his words and the utter humiliation of it all. Getting fired was one thing, but on my birthday? And by a guy who had constantly piled his dirty work on me, made me handle the worst clients, the impossible deadlines, all while he reaped the rewards? It was surreal. "Is this really how you're doing this, Jack? No warning, no severance. Not even a lousy happy birthday?" Jack sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "Maddie, this is just business. We'll give you the standard severance package, of course, but we need to be able to adapt, and frankly, I need a team that represents the direction we're moving in." "Direction?" I repeated, bitterness oozing from the word. "And where exactly is that? More overpriced properties no one wants? More deals where you're squeezing pennies out of renters?" He shrugged, clearly unbothered. "It's what works, Maddie. It's what keeps the lights on." For a moment, I thought about fighting back. About throwing every sacrifice I'd made in his face. But the look on his face was so impassive, so utterly sure of himself, that I knew it wouldn't make a difference. "Well," I said finally, getting up and forcing myself to keep it together, "good luck with your direction, Jack. Hope it leads somewhere worth going." I grabbed my things and left without looking back. Not that he deserved even a second of my disappointment. Months passed. Finding a job wasn't easy. Jack's words about youth echoed around every interview room, every LinkedIn rejection. Companies wanted someone younger, someone who could fit into a corporate culture I didn't even recognize anymore. It was humiliating. Worse, I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I wasn't dynamic enough, if maybe I'd hit some invisible expiration date in the industry. It was around this time that I started spending more time with my cousin Jess. Jess had always been the rebellious one in the family, the one who'd gone out to California, made a fortune in tech, and then come back to Pittsburgh as if nothing had changed. She had this way of seeing straight through people, an intuition that made you feel both safe and completely exposed. "So, you're telling me you just let him fire you, just like that?" Jess asked one evening, raising an eyebrow over her glass of wine as we sat in her cramped apartment. "Maddie, He was the one who should have been on the chopping block. I sighed, swirling the wine in my glass. I know, Jess. But what was I supposed to do? The guy held all the cards. She smirked, leaning back in her chair. Maybe he held them then. But things change, you know. Dominion Properties is a sinking ship. Jack's been mishandling that company for years. I blinked, surprised. How do you know that? She shrugged. I know people. And I keep my ear to the ground. Let's just say Dominion's books aren't exactly squeaky clean. They're bleeding cash, buying properties they can't afford, and Jack's got debt out the wazoo. It's only a matter of time before someone swoops in. I laughed, a little bitterly. Well, I hope that someone has the satisfaction of firing him for once. A mischievous glint appeared in Jess's eyes, the kind I'd learned meant she was cooking up something. Why not you? I nearly choked on my wine. You're joking. Why not? I have contacts. Some people in venture capital who love picking up failing companies for cheap and turning them around. And you, Maddie, know Dominion from the inside. You know what works and what doesn't. I stared at her, not entirely sure if she was serious. Jess, I don't have that kind of money. Jess waved a hand. Forget money. I'm talking investors. They put up the cash, you put up the knowledge. We buy Dominion out from under Jack, and you get to call the shots. The idea sounded insane. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. Maybe it wasn't so crazy. Over the next few months, Jess and I met with her contacts, a group of sharp-eyed investors with a taste for risky ventures. We dug into Dominion's books, and sure enough, Jack had left the company drowning in debt. His greed and ego had driven Dominion to the brink, and his desperate attempt to restructure was nothing more than a last-ditch effort to keep the lights on. The deal went through faster than I ever expected. By the time I signed the final papers, I was the new owner of Dominion Properties. The former not a good fit was now in charge, and I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. My first day back at Dominion was surreal. Walking through those familiar gray cubicles, watching heads turn as they realized who I was, it was a moment I savored. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compared to the look on Jack's face when he saw me walk into the building. His mouth actually dropped open. Maddie, he said, half in disbelief, half in irritation, what are you doing here? I gave him a slow smile, taking my time. Oh, didn't you hear? Dominion's under new management. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only he could hear. I bought the company, Jack. He stared at me, completely stunned. For once, Mr. Perfect didn't have anything to say. You bought Dominion? Yep. Funny how things work out, isn't it? Jack's face turned red, his composure cracking as he struggled to process this new reality. You're serious. Oh, very serious, I said, loving every second of it. And as the new owner, I think it's time for some restructuring. So, Jack. I paused, savoring the moment. I'm not sure you're a good fit. For the first time, Jack looked genuinely nervous. He sputtered, searching for words. Maddie, you don't know what you're doing. Dominion is. It's complicated. You need experience. I laughed, a sound I knew was bitter. Experience? Jack, you've spent years running this place into the ground while people like me did all the work. And now it's my turn. He looked at me, and I could see the wheels turning, the anger simmering just below the surface. But he held his tongue, probably calculating his next move. Well, he said finally, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, I suppose congratulations are in order. The next few months were a whirlwind. Dominion had more financial skeletons in its closet than I'd imagined. Jack's ego had driven him to acquire buildings we had no business buying, all because he wanted Dominion to look like it was thriving. But with Jess's help, I started to clean up his messes, trimming the fat and negotiating deals that actually made sense. But Jack didn't go quietly. He stayed on as a junior executive, though now under my supervision. He couldn't stand it, but his pride wouldn't let him leave. Every day, I watched him, his resentment growing like a dark cloud as he realized he was no longer in control. One day, he finally snapped. You think you're so much better than me, don't you, Maddie? He snarled, storming into my office. I looked up calmly. Jack, if I thought about you as much as you seem to think about me, I'd never get anything done. He scoffed, leaning over my desk. You don't deserve any of this. Dominion was mine. I built it. Built it? Jack, you nearly tore it apart with your arrogance. This company deserves better. He shook his head, the disdain clear on his face. This isn't over, Maddie. I raised an eyebrow. I think it is. You're welcome to leave if you can't handle it. With that, he stormed out. The office was silent, and I could see my team's faces, a mixture of relief and respect. Jack was gone, and Dominion was finally free from his toxic shadow. It's been a year now, and Dominion is thriving. I'm finally in a place where I feel valued, where my experience and judgment are respected. And Jack? Last I heard, He was trying to start his own property management company, struggling to get it off the ground. Maybe he'll succeed, or maybe he'll find out just how hard it is to build something real. But honestly, I don't think about him much. I have a business to run, and a team that deserves a boss who sees them as more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. And every so often, when I pass by my office and see my reflection, I remind myself, sometimes, life does offer second chances. If you're willing to take them. Over the next few months, Dominion transformed into something I could be proud of. The stale office culture, the high turnover, and the constant anxiety about meeting impossible quotas were replaced by collaboration, fresh ideas, and a real sense of purpose. I made a point to know everyone's name, from the janitors to the junior staff. I knew what it felt like to be treated like a cog in the machine, and I wasn't about to run Dominion that way. Jess was my sounding board through it all. We'd go over balance sheets in her apartment, strategizing late into the night, cups of coffee and takeout containers scattered across the table. "You know, I never imagined you'd be in this position," she said one evening, tapping her pen against the spreadsheet. "Remember when you told me you'd stay at Dominion just long enough to save up for that beach house?" I laughed, shaking my head. Feels like another lifetime. Back then, I couldn't see past Jack's shadow. She gave me a proud look. "Well, you've done it, Maddie. And for what it's worth, I'm glad Dominion's in your hands." It wasn't always smooth sailing. Some days were downright brutal, especially when we had to make tough decisions on layoffs and sell off properties that weren't pulling their weight. I'd sit in my office some nights, long after everyone had gone home, staring at the glowing cityscape beyond the window, wondering if Jack had been right in his own way. Maybe I didn't know everything. Maybe I was in over my head. But I'd remind myself why I was here, why Jess and I had bought Dominion in the first place, because the company, the people in it, deserved a chance. Then one day, out of the blue, Jack reached out. I saw his name pop up on my phone and felt my stomach twist. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Maddie," he said, his voice strangely flat. "I need to talk to you. In person." I almost laughed, wondering what kind of scheme he had brewing now. But there was something about his tone that stopped me. I agreed to meet him the next day, at a small cafe on the edge of town, a quiet place with none of the glitzy airs Jack was known for. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. Jack looked older, his sharp, confident demeanor softened into something I'd never seen before. He looked beaten, worn out. "Maddie," he greeted, standing awkwardly, like he was searching for the right words. "Jack," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "What's this about?" He sighed, looking down at his coffee. I've been struggling," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "That new firm I tried to start? It's a disaster. No one wants to do business with me. Turns out people remember things, and, well, my reputation has caught up with me." I didn't say anything, just let him talk. "And the debts," he continued, voice trembling slightly, "it's all piling up. I never thought it would end up like this." I looked at him, realizing I was seeing Jack Medford as a human being for the first time. Gone was the power, the arrogance. In its place was a man grappling with the fallout of his own choices. "What do you want from me, Jack?" I asked finally, keeping my tone measured. He looked up, eyes filled with an emotion I could hardly believe, regret. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice shaking. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I pushed you out of Dominion because I was threatened by you. I thought you'd try to take what was mine, so I took it from you first." The honesty in his voice stunned me. I never thought I'd hear Jack admit to his own flaws, let alone apologize. "I didn't expect this," I said after a long pause. "But thank you, Jack. Apologies don't erase the past, but it's a start." He nodded, looking relieved, like he'd lifted a weight from his chest. "I don't deserve a second chance, Maddie. But I'm glad that you're doing something good with Dominion. Better than I ever could." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us contemplating the strange twists that had brought us here. Finally, he stood, giving me a small nod before walking out, leaving me alone with a strange sense of closure. After that, things settled into a steady rhythm. Dominion grew, and as the months turned into a year, I saw the company evolve into something I could truly be proud of. We started new projects, affordable housing developments, partnerships with local communities, projects with a purpose. I could see it in the faces of my team. They were no longer just employees, they were invested, committed, proud of the work we were doing. Jess was right by my side every step of the way, and even though she eventually took on projects of her own, we'd meet up now and then, reminiscing over the whirlwind journey that had led us here. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling meeting with a group of investors, I leaned back in my chair, taking in the office I now called mine. On the corner of my desk sat a small, potted fern, the same one I'd grabbed on the day I was fired. It had grown, thriving in the sunlight by the window. Just like me. I smiled, Thinking back on everything, on Jack, on the late nights, on the doubts and fears that had nearly stopped me so many times. But through it all, I'd found something I'd never thought possible. Not just a job, but a purpose. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not in firing Jack, or buying the company out from under him, but in transforming Dominion into something good. In showing the world, and myself, that I was more than what Jack had tried to make me believe. The journey had taken me somewhere I never expected, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to whatever came next.